My name is Isaias Hernandez. I'm an environmental educator and the content creator of Queer Brown Vegan. And today we're going to be talking about the planet, food, and systems.
Let me start by just telling you a little bit about Support and Feed. So Support and Feed was born in a way right here in Miami 3 years ago. I was here with my daughter, Billie Eilish, on what was supposed to be a world tour. And we had worked really hard to create a tour that was highly sustainable. We had composting, we had all plant-based catering for our 100-member crew for 3 meals a day. We had no plastic bottles. And then the pandemic hit and we went home. So when we went home, we very immediately realized that there was going to be even more food insecurity than we already had in our city of Los Angeles. And because I've spent my life being so concerned with climate change and the environment, and because when I was 21 years old, I saw an infographic that said how much of the Amazon rainforest was destroyed to make one McDonald's hamburger. And having become a plant-based eater in my teens, originally a vegetarian and later a vegan, I had always been so aware of this connection to climate. So when we were in LA, we thought, well, why don't we form something where we can feed people, but we can also address climate change? So we kind of very quickly scrambled, and we started purchasing meals at an equitable wage from our local community restaurants, plant-based meals, and serving them to people experiencing food insecurity. What we realized very, very quickly was that this was a real missing opportunity in so many of our food systems in the country. That if we could partner with community organizations, particularly in food apartheids, where people lacked access, either due to proximity or cost to nourishing foods, we could help their health so tremendously. And at the same time, we could be affecting a climate-friendly situation, because we know that plant-based eating is essential to address climate change. We can dance around it. We tend to dance around it at climate conferences a lot, but we know how essential it is. So we formed an organization. We provided these nourishing meals. We quickly expanded to New York City, Philadelphia, Washington, D.C. For the last 3 years, for a year and a half, we were an entirely volunteer organization. During the pandemic, as you know, so many people were laid off and people wanted to help, and we raised so much money, we fed so many people. And then we realized that people really wanted information education. So we started a really active information education program geared at helping people receiving the meals know the health benefits, and to our larger audience, social media audience, to understand we could have that platform to teach about climate change, sustainability, food equity, et cetera. So we gained a large following that we could provide that information to. So over the last 3 years, we've expanded now to 10 priority cities in the US, Detroit, I'm gonna miss some, Detroit, Chicago, Nashville, Atlanta, New Orleans, Minneapolis, Chicago, and the 4 I mentioned before, and also to London and the UK, and then we partnered in Australia with Oz Harvest to deliver 52,000 plant-based meals and information education there. So that's what we've been doing. Our goal is to change culture, to feed people nourishing food, to help people understand that they deserve nourishing plant-based food, they deserve the healthiest food, and to help the wider community gain acceptance, access, and demand for plant-based food to change the culture to a more sustainable way of eating.
Yeah, and I would say, just supporting off of Maggie and the work that you've done, is that my relationship to food systems started off at a very young age. I grew up in Los Angeles, living in poverty and living off food stamps. And as a young child, you don't really recognize you're poor or you're really struggling with food until someone points it out. And as someone who relied a lot on food banks and also going to grocery discounted aisles, I remember my earliest memories of always having to consume meat, dairy, and cheese, and realizing how unhealthy it was. And for 17 years straight in my entire life, my parents every morning would make me drink milk in the assumption of that you'll have strong bones. Clearly I grew tall, so I mean that maybe came to fruition from genetics, but I'd say that it really affected my body is that I had to go to several doctors and to just really be told like, my internal digestive system has been affected. And so when I was in college, I learned about this global food system from, yes, the environmental side, but I also learned it from both the animal rights issue and the human rights issue, where our industrialized system is heavily reliant on undocumented people that look like me, that are working in these slaughterhouse issues. And when it comes to animals, they are being desecrated at such a massive rate. And so when I took this global food system course in college, I realized that it is unsustainable for the planet in the ways at which we produce our food. Agribusiness, right? Like in my environmental science classes, I was not taught to think to redesign the system, but to continue to uphold it. And a lot of that is really focused on the idea that agribusiness is a profitable industry because it works for the fossil fuel industry, it works with the border and surveillance industry, it works with the prison industry. And so this becomes a humans, environmental, and animal rights issue together. We really cannot separate it. And with work that I've been doing with Support and Feed as a contributor, I think this is a really prime example in which how individuals and young environmentalists like ourselves can actually team up with organizations to create that local change.
I love that. The panel earlier today that you were on, spoke about intergenerational work. And I think of some of the leaders in this movement, and I'll just say that there were people speaking about the importance of switching to a plant-based diet decades and decades ago in many cultures. Francis Moore Lepay's book, Diet for a Small Planet, comes to mind. That was published in 1971. So we knew this was coming. We tended to look at things, I think, now from this lens of, again, this was in the global south. We've had climate disasters for so long, but now it's at people's back door and they're sort of waking up to it. But we were forewarned. We've known the solutions. We've known the strategies for a long time. One of the challenges that we face with Support and Feed is we see our first point of information education as the meal that we serve, because we have a lot of indoctrination in our country about the importance of meat and dairy, and very little indoctrination about the damage caused to our environment from the meat and dairy industry. So when people are coming at it from a lifelong indoctrination of you must have meat and or dairy on your plate, that's a lot to overcome. I will say also, because we've been so dedicated to this way of cooking, we've limited the way we cook for so long. Now with the innovation of so many amazing plant-based foods, that's because we finally have the opportunity to do so. A cashew cheese is something we might have created 50 years ago, except that we were very indoctrinated into the different systems. So one of the things we do is that we, first of all, for the sake of respect, we offer a delicious restaurant quality plant-based meal, an item that you or I would want to purchase, and we offer that, and we make sure it's extremely delicious as well as nourishing. And so that the first time somebody might have a plant-based meal, you want them to go, oh, this was good. I could eat that way. So that's one thing that we have to overcome, along with a lot of just misconceptions about the health benefits, et cetera. What are some of the misconceptions that you think people have?
Yeah, I think it starts with our language and really reframing it. Earlier we probably heard about the terminology protein or it or object, and I think we really have showcased how we've devalued ecological systems, specifically animals, the fauna, flora, fungi. We really devalue it in our economic system, and therefore I think a lot of us, when we're consuming these types of animals, right? We don't really associate it. And I think I'd love to tell everyone here, it's everyone loves animals. I know you all do. The ways in which we show our love for animals is of course different. And so I think that, we need to start to reframe the language about what we're really consuming, because I was so uncomfortable when I was forced to do a course presentation around what's better, industrial meat or organic meat, and then you just realize, they both get slaughtered, the animals, at the end of the day. And so I was just trying to come with terms at the point as a young environmentalist, but isn't this a sentient being still? And so I think with Support and Feed, I think one of the things I want to really advocate is that they advocate for access, that poor people who have been disenfranchised by the economic system deserve a choice. There are so many times that I've gone to food banks growing up and just being told, you should be grateful that we're giving you food. And I really think that's really harmful to disempower already kids that are trying to get an equitable food, because everyone can agree your child should not be eating meat 7 times out of the week. So this is something where we need to kind of shift that culture and reframe language.
That's one of the things that happened to us in the very early stages of Support and Feed. We got asked to participate in a Los Angeles school district food drive, and it's a long story, but we found ourselves helping put sort of dry cleaning bags full of food that consisted of milk, cheese sticks, and sausage biscuits into people's cars. And it was really eye-opening and shocking, particularly to the fact that the communities that we were serving that day have an extremely large rate of lactose intolerance. So basically, we were giving food to people that would make them sick, and that's all they got. They didn't get any vegetables. They didn't get anything alternative or nourishing. And the idea that I would love you all to take home today is that this is an intersectional mission. You can't look at climate change in a vacuum. People have talked about it already, but it's a social justice movement. It's an equity conversation. So why can't we take our food systems? That means our systems that feed children in schools, our systems that deliver meals to people experiencing food insecurity, our prison systems. All of these systems are a perfect opportunity to address climate change with changing the food that we serve to a more climate-friendly food. Not to mention, all of those strategies are more healthy for the individuals receiving, could reduce medical costs, et cetera, et cetera. Looking at also from a cultural lens, many, many cultures have a plant-based food history that's sort of been denied.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, if you look back to the origins of culture, like, soy and tofu, for example, comes from a lot of Asian cultures. You look at, places where I'm from in Mexico, we used to be a large fungivore population. And, I do a lot of foraging and try to teach a lot of people in their communities that, yeah, our lands have probably been contaminated due to environmental racism. A lot of us don't have access to land to grow food. So how do we grow microgreens, for example, or teach kids how to identify local plants and berries in their neighborhood that of course are not toxic, and don't go near the freeways either, but like go around your neighborhood and to be able to identify. Because if you show a diagram today with 10 food brands and then 10 plants, kids will probably say, yes, I know McDonald's, Jack in the Box, all of this. If you show them the other side of the picture of the plants, they'll be like, well, I don't know what that is. I know it's a leaf or something. So, how do we really engage with children to have ecological wealth? And that goes back into really empowering, but also educating the community of what systems have already existed there.
One of the exciting things we were able to do in the last year, actually with the grant from Wild Elements, we were actually able to run a hydroponic farm, the Hydro Wild Lab, at the Boys and Girls Clubs of Metro LA. And we have a farmer and a staff member and a curriculum so the children can grow the food, harvest the food, it can feed the families, our chefs can make it into meals, et cetera. We also work with partner organizations like FarmLink or Sharing Excess who do food rescue. And so we can enhance our meals with produce boxes, we can do cooking demonstrations. Our real hope is to be able to tie that system in so that we can take the excess produce, cook it into the meals with our chef, deliver it to families, and have students and young people in the community learning how to prepare that food. We also are now working with more and more restaurants that are not plant-based by nature, but trying to encourage them to add plant-based items to their meals. For the sake of the communities, we can then purchase them for that fair rate, and also to keep them on their menus. It's a big strategy. It kind of seems logical and obvious, though. That's kind of the funny thing about it. A lot of things that that are sort of groundbreaking are really just obvious to combine the elements. We talked a little bit about the sharing of knowledge and the platform generating. Would you talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like for a lot of older people and also younger people are here, there's great mentorship opportunities, but how much collaboration can actually happen as a young environmental digital media creator? I really struggle with the fact that I don't operate as a nonprofit. And so organizations like Support and Feed that have been able to kind of give opportunities to young environmentalists to actually create curriculums in their communities where they come from, like in LA, for example, and also really engage with different people outside of the movement. And Maggie has done so much incredible work, especially, and your daughter, Billie Eilish, who actually gave and platformed so many Black and brown activists here. Shout out to Wawa, that's the founder of Black Girl Environmentalists over here. She has done so much amazing work, and I think Billie is a really great example in which, there's someone that's like in this music industry. She may not be an expert in the climate crisis, but she acknowledges it. So how does she work with the local nonprofits like her mom's organizations and connects with local activists that come from these spaces to actually amplify? And I think when organizations tell me, well, I don't really know how to work with you, this is an example of what they're doing right. They brought me in as an educational contributor. I consult for them. I really build community with them and actually get to reconnect with my community through them.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you for all that you've given to Support and Feed too. I know we're gonna run out of time, and I wanna talk about how we can all work together, how we can be impactful. I will say that, for example, Global Citizen, which is a wonderful organization that we love tremendously, we were able to impact what they serve at their conferences. Billie, fortunately, has quite a bit of power, so basically performed at their events and said, I can't perform here again if you still have meat on your table. So the events from then on do not, because you cannot talk about climate and serve meat. You just can't do it. It's inconsistent with values. So we need to start taking that seriously. Demand plant-based foods. And I would suggest not just options. You can have a plant-based conference for 3 days. Everyone in this room is person of privilege, and we can all stand to do it. We must respect people's cultural needs. We must allow that people may not have the privilege to eat a plant-based diet. Yeah. Many people do not have that access. They don't have the privilege. But those of us who do have a responsibility to do so. We talk a lot about regenerative farming. Mm-hmm. Regenerative farming is awesome when it comes to soil for things like plants. When it comes to animals, it is not a strategy that is sustainable. You can have all the cows grass-fed that you want. Our planet cannot sustain that. So when we talk about regenerative agriculture, let's not let that be a way to disguise the fact that we have to minimize our consumption of animal products. We have to do it. It is imperative. The IPC has told us. We all know. We acknowledge it. Yes. So ask your conferences, ask events you go into, what is on the menu? What are you serving? What is on your plate matters. And personally, you can all take our pledge to eat at the very least one fully plant-based meal a day. It would be amazing if you could do all of it, but at least one fully plant-based meal a day would make a tremendous impact. And tell us how we can partner with you. We're feeding people all over the country. We're going to be at Something in the Water soon. We're on tour with Paramore, talking to people, getting people to take the pledge, and teaching young people at the Reverb Eco Village about climate action. You were at the Reverb Eco Village.
Yeah, just like teaming up with local environmental orgs that work in the intersections of music, culture, and the environment. And I think, echoing off what you said, Maggie, it's like, the last few days here have been a little bit brutal for me because I was just eating fruits and just a salad. But, I think we collectively can come and agree saying, everyone should just commit to eating plant-based. Those who are here who have the economic privilege, who have the access, who have a choice to be able to do that, it's not controversial to, adopt that choice and to really advocate for it because, look at this delicious plant-based meal that we're eating today. Like, this is the first day I could say, wow, this is so amazing to see it after the last few days. And the other thing is also just hire young people to help do communications work. Like, honestly, say my name for other speaking events and also be able to connect with other opportunities because a lot of us don't really get those options. And I think nonprofits really struggle sometimes to work with young environmentalists, but I think this is really a strong case study that you have right here in which I met Support and Feed just last year and they've become family to me. So thank you so much, Maggie.
Thank you. Well, thank you all for listening to us. Thank you for this meal. And if you'd like to talk with us further, if you'd like to partner with Support and Feed, we would love to work with you in anything you're doing. We could advise you or you could help us feed more people and change our culture.